Hello everyone, in this video I'll be ranking all of the subclasses in Baldur's Gate 3 in Honour Mode on a tier list. So I have all 46 subclasses here. I'm going to be giving my thoughts on which of these are the most effective in Honour Mode and which of them make the game a little bit more challenging, as you could beat it with really any of these subclasses, but some combinations work better than others, so I'll be talking about that in this video. The first one we got is the College of Valor Bard. Now, what they bring to the table is the Combat Inspiration, which allows you to add your, instead of going with like an ability check or saving throw, you can actually add it to the weapon damage. So you can get a 1d6 at level 3 added to the damage, which is nice. Like, I just think that for a bonus action, you may as well just use an offhand attack with a crossbow or something. I don't know if this is really that much better than a sword bard. It does get shield proficiency at level 3, which is nice, but you can choose a race that gets shield proficiency and not have to worry about that. I just don't feel like the Valor Bard does much more than like a Lore Bard or a Sword Bard does, so I'm going to put the Valor Bard in the C tier. It is effective, and again, at the end of the day, a Bard is still really great in your party, but I do think the Sword Bard really outshines all of the other subclasses, so yeah, it's still great being able to add to a damage roll or an attack roll, but yeah, I do think that the Lore Bard and Sword Bard outplay it. The Lore Bard is more of a caster. They get the ability to get magical secrets at level 6, which grants them things like Spirit Guardians really early on, or even your Hunger of Adar. Both of those will require concentration. If you're going to use Spirit Guardians, you likely are going to have a Cleric, so might not be what you want to go with for that, as when you go with Spirit Guardians, you typically want to get up and close in combat, and this is not a class that gets up close in combat. And Hunger of Adar, you may as well go with a Warlock, but it's still nice to have spell slot progression as well as the ability to cast Hunger of Adar. So Lore Bard is a little bit better. I'd probably say B tier for that. It's still a Bard, so you get an extra short rest, which is really nice because long resting does cost a bit more camp supplies, so that is another consideration in Honour Mode. But the Sword Bard just makes both of these classes look much weaker in comparison. So what makes the Sword Bard so great is you get the extra attack level 6, you get Flourishes, which allows you to attack multiple targets at once. What makes this so great is the fact that there's two builds that work very well here. So there's the Paladin, which is a Bard 10 levels of Bard with 2 levels of Paladin. So you get the magical secrets, and you also get Smite, Divine Smite, which you can flourish and smite at the same time. Also, Fighter level 2 adds Action Surge for really great burst damage. So those are two really powerful builds. Now, what makes them so great is the Helmet of Arcane Acuity and the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. So with this, the Helmet of Arcane Acuity adds +1 to spell attacks or spell save DC every single time that you land a weapon attack, and you can use Arrow of Many Targets to hit multiple people, and then get your spell save DC up to a spell save DC of 30 to 35, which is just incredible. And no creature is going to be resisting that late in the game unless they're like a legendary enemy. So that is incredibly huge. With the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, you can cast it as a bonus action. You can do like things like Confusion, Hold Person, and if you take the Paladin, you get Command, which is also going to scale off your Charisma, making this a extremely useful dip. So I really like the Sword Bard. You could even go level 12 with it if you wanted to, but I think it's best to dip either 2 levels of Fighter or 2 levels of Paladin for Divine Smite or Action Surge. It's extremely strong and probably one of the best in Honour Mode overall, just because it has incredible crowd control and it can damage. You can do bow attacks and then bonus action. It does take a little while to set up, but even so, go level 6 of the Bard and then take 2 levels of Paladin so you can do Flourishes and Smite with your Flourishes so you can smite 2 people at once. Really effective damage dealer, but also great for crowd control, so I can't put them anything lower than S tier on this list. Next, we got the Cleric subclasses, and Cleric is typically you want to have a Cleric in your party most times. You can get by if you use like a Druid or something, because you do want someone that can heal at times. Paladins can also fill that role, but of these subclasses of Cleric, I think there's like 3 that really shine. So Light Domain Cleric is incredible. If you're going with a Radiating Orb build, the Light Domain is the way to go. Radiating Orb builds come online really early, which is super useful in Honour Mode when every single minute counts. So I think that the Light Domain Cleric is S tier for that reason, because you can get your Radiating Orb items early in Act 1, and then you also have the ability to reduce enemy attack rolls, keeping your team safe. So this is a great defensive class to keep your team alive. They can also heal, but they can also do things like Fireball, run around with Spirit Guardians. I would highly recommend going with a Radiating Orb build, because that gives -1 to attack rolls for every Radiating Orb you build up, and you can stack them really fast with this. So grab the Blood of Lathlander as well, get yourself Sunbeam, and this is a class that is really, really strong. Next, we have the Trickery Domain Cleric, which it's not that great. At the end of the day, a Cleric is still a Cleric. They still get access to Planar Ally at level 11, which is an incredible spell, but I think the Trickery Domain, it has a concentration on its unique spells that it gets, and that's not really something you want when the Cleric already has so many awesome concentrations that you could use. So the Trickery Domain, you could run it for a challenge, but you're better off going with Light Domain, Tempest Domain, War Domain, or even Life Domain. So yeah, I had to put that in the lowest tier just because it doesn't bring as much to the table as some of the other subclasses. Now we get the Knowledge Domain Cleric, which is another decent one. It's mostly for ability checks, which are important in Honor Mode, especially if you go that route with trying to avoid combat as much as possible. But at this point, in Knowledge Domain Cleric, you might as well just go with a Bard, probably. It's not a bad class. I do think it's better in the Trickery Domain, but Clerics at the end of the day are still really strong. But the Light Cleric, Tempest Domain, and War Domain just have so many highs to them that I don't think that I can put... It might be like a C tier. It's great for ability checks, but that's basically it, I would say, for its extra unique selling proposition. Whereas we have other subclasses here that are very strong. Like the Nature Domain's actually an underrated subclass, because early on, you can grab a torch and use Shillelagh, or Shillelagh, whatever you want to pronounce it. There's multiple different pronunciations, but with the War or Nature Domain Cleric, you deal a lot of damage early on, because you get heavy armor, you get the ability to use torches, which add a 1d4 fire damage on top of your weapon attacks. I would say the Nature Domain is probably about B tier. It's an underrated class, but if you want to play a Nature Domain Cleric, you probably should just play a Druid. I feel like that's a better usage of resources, so it is not a bad class, but it just gets a little outshined by others. It's great early on, though, especially early game. Nature Domain is probably one of the strongest subclasses in levels 1 through 3, but then it kind of tapers off after that. Next, we get the Tempest Domain. Now, what makes the Tempest Domain extremely strong is you get your Channel Divinity, which allows you to roll the maximum amount of lightning or thunder damage. And you also get a really powerful thunder damage spell as well. But what's best about the Tempest Domain is if you go all the way up to level, let's say 11, and then you take one level of the Wizard and use like the helmet, the Circlet of Intelligence, you can actually cast yourself Chain Lightning and then uproll it to make sure that it deals the maximum amount of damage. So you can do it, it'll hit like 170 some damage guaranteed if it hits, which is just busted strong if you have Create Water set up. And one thing also in Honor Mode, the Steel Watch is usually weak to lightning, but they're not in Honor Mode, so you do have to use Create Water, which is a Cleric spell. So this is definitely S tier. I think it's a little bit better in Light Domain. The Light Domain actually... It depends. Tempest Domain's all about damage. Light Domain's about damage and keeping your team safe. So they're interchangeable, I guess, depending on what you have for gear. But the Light Domain, actually, I might say I prefer Tempest, but I think the Light Domain sets up quicker. And especially with a Radiating Orb build, it's very useful in Honor Mode. Next, we have the Life Domain Cleric, which is great. This is great for healing. It has a lot of buffs to its own healing, so that can be really useful too in combat. However, you typically want to deal damage and try to crowd control to avoid taking damage versus healing back damage with your actions. The Life Domain Cleric is really good, though. I don't know if it's good enough to put it in the S tier, but I think it's going to be our first A tier. It's a very useful class overall because of the extra boost to it gets to healing. It also heals itself, so this is probably the best, yeah, definitely the best healer in the game. But Baldur's Gate 3's action economy is so interesting in the fact that you want to get enemies removed as quickly as possible, so healing should be kind of an afterthought. You got short rests for that, especially if you got a Bard, you got extra short rests. So I like the Life Domain Cleric. I ran a full playthrough with it, but I just don't know if it's as good as some of the other subclasses, like the War Domain Cleric, which... I think that the War Domain is probably the best single level dip in the game, because with the War Domain Cleric, we get the War Priest charges. So with a War Priest charge, whenever you make a weapon unarmed or weapon attack, you can add a War Priest charge to make an additional attack as a bonus action. So what makes this so good is it's an incredible single level dip, because you get heavy armor with this. Now, normally you don't get heavy armor, but this is a subclass feature with the heavy armor, so you can get this added to any class. So if you want to add it to your Warlock, you get yourself heavy armor. Also, you get the ability to get yourself Divine Favor and Shield of Faith, which is not bad, but 3 bonus actions attacks, that's huge. You can have this on a fighter, and 11 levels of fighter, they get their 3 attacks, and then you get a 4th attack with your bonus action by taking a single level of the War Domain. The single level dip is putting this in the S tier. It's still a good class if you take it further, but I think that as a whole, going with the War Domain Cleric, that single level dip is probably the best single level dip in the game for heavy armor, martial weapons, and 3 bonus action attacks. So yeah, it's a great subclass. It probably not as good later on compared to some of the others. Like if you're going full level 12 in Cleric, Tempest or Light would be a better bet, or even Life Domain. But the War Domain is still extremely strong, so I have to recognize it where it belongs. Next, we got the Moon Druid, Land Druid, and Spore Druid. So Druids are an interesting subclass because they have Wild Shape, which gives them temporary health. Now, they also early on have really great damage because of Shillelagh there. So you get this, you can deal damage, make your club magical. Again, torches, extra damage. The Circle of the Moon is what I think to be probably the tankiest build in the game, because with a certain hat that you can get 3 Wild Shape charges, which allows you to become an owlbear 3 times, and then you also have full spell casting. So the Circle of the Moon is really underrated, I would say, of the 3 Druid subclasses, because being able to Wild Shape on demand is really useful. What's also nice, too, with the Circle of the Moon Druid is you get the Air Myrmidon, which has the Electrified Flail attack. And when you Wild Shape into the Air Myrmidon, you can attack 3 times with the Electrified Flail. When you summon a Conjure Elemental, they can only attack once with that, but you can potentially stun 3 people in your Air Myrmidon form. If you take Tavern Brawler, the Earth Myrmidon's really strong. And even Tavern Brawler Tavern Brawler works differently in Honour Mode. It doesn't actually add damage to the attack rolls when you're Wild Shape, but it still adds to the attack rolls, so you're much more likely to land. You're pretty much 95% chance of hitting with the Circle of Moon Druid with Tavern Brawler. I would have to say probably top of the A tier. Could be S tier, because this is a really great tanky class. Yeah, I think the Circle of the Moon is very underrated. It could potentially be an S tier. I'm just going to leave in the A tier. We'll reevaluate near the end. But yeah, Circle of the Moon, tankiest build, I would say, in the game, with multiple owlbears, getting the temporary health from the light armor for the Moon Druid and the extra damage protection from that. That's very tanky. And also what's nice about the owlbear is it has a lower armor class than probably most of your team, so it draws aggro to people. Another nice thing with this is you can actually take these... Start with the Sorcerer, get yourself Constitution saving throw proficiency, Armor of Agathis, Wild Shape, and then you have temporary health, and you got temporary frost or cold damage. And then once you get the armor, you also get the temporary health too. But then also taking a level of fighter because taking a level of fighter will give you the armor class boost of +1, which actually persists into your Wild Shape form. You can also drink strength potions, and that will last in a Wild Shape form, so that's another nice benefit. And the fighter also gives martial weapons, which you actually need for your Myrmidon form. So S tier to top of the A tier. Next, we have the Circle of the Land Druid, which I think is another really great choice because it has a lot of survivability. This is a full caster, and it does get access to spells like Cone of Cold, which is nice. It doesn't get Chain Lightning, which is a big boost to the Sorcerer and the Wizard, because Chain Lightning has huge damage, but the Circle of the Land Druid is still quite good. What's nice about the Druid is you have Wild Shape as a backup. So if something hits the fan and you need extra health, you can Wild Shape and get a little bit of additional health there to help you survive. I would put this probably in the top of the B tier. Circle of the Land Druid is underrated. All Druids are great. A tier, B tier. It's just that if you want to go full caster, you're probably best off going with a Sorcerer or even going with a Wizard, Abjuration Wizard, for tankiness as well. Because the Land Druid has tankiness from Wild Shape. It can also recover its spell slots up to level 5, similar to a Wizard. But if you want to go tankiness, go Abjuration Wizard. And finally, we have the Circle of Spores. I love the Circle of Spores. It actually has a really great multiclass. 6 levels of this with 6 levels in the Necromancy School Wizard. That is a very powerful subclass because with that, you get fungal zombies which take hits for your team. You get extra necrotic damage. And the biggest benefit of all is the Armor of the Spore Keeper in Act 3, which gives you haste spores. So you can cast spores of haste on your entire team, giving everyone haste. They can run into it, get haste, run out, 2 actions. So for your sorcerers and casters, that's 2 spells, that's 2 fireballs mid-game, that's 2 chain lightnings. Really strong without having to concentrate on haste. And when the haste is over, you still keep that extra action. You can also create grenades that make haste spores, so that's another consideration. But I would have to say the Circle of Spores is also high A tier. With the haste spores, I would say like it could even potentially be an S tier choice. Like these 2 underrated classes. I'm a big fan of the Druid, but yeah. They are pretty strong, I would say, depending on how you build it out. The armor for the Moon Druid and the Spore Druid are essential for making it strong. It's probably something you want to multi-class into, or you want to class into later in the game. Now we got the Fighter. The Fighter is a really strong class. Battlemaster, Eldritch Knight, and Champion. There's 3 of them. So the Champion gets 2 fighting styles, which is a unique action. It also has increased critical hit chance. The Battlemaster Fighter has Riposte, which is a very powerful reaction. You can attack back, dealing 1d8 or 1d10 extra damage. I think that the Battlemaster is probably an S tier choice. Top of the A tier to S tier. I might put both these. So I guess I'll talk about Eldritch Knight in a minute. Battlemaster Fighter gets the maneuvers, menacing attack to frighten the target, trip attack to knock them prone, set up your sneak attacks. It's really useful, getting a reaction. And Rally is also really nice because Rally can't be counterspelled. You can use Rally to pick up your downed allies. So if you have someone that went down, it gives them 8 temporary health points, and this can't be counterspelled. So typically, if you're going to use Healing Word to pick up a downed ally, it can be counterspelled, and that sucks in Honour Mode. However, Rally can't be, so that boosts the Battlemaster Fighter up to S tier, I would say, just for the survivability that you get from taking it. So very useful. The fighter is a straightforward great class. You get you get action surge, which will stack the extra attacks. Haste doesn't give you extra attacks in Honour Mode, so that's one thing to keep in mind. But fighters get it. Eldritch Knight. This is another really useful build. Eldritch Knights typically are throwers, and you'll get the Nirelna late game, which is really strong. You also get the Returning Pike in Act 1. You can get the Lightning Jabber, Bind Weapon, and throw it. It does extra lightning damage. The Dwarven Thrower, another really great throwing hammer. So Eldritch Knights are really powerful because you get a bit of spellcasting. You get Eldritch Strike. You can get spells like Hold Person from the Eldritch Knight. I would say Eldritch Knight, I think, is a little bit better than a Battlemaster Fighter, but I'm still a big fan of Battlemaster Fighter. It's just the Eldritch Knight has so much more versatility to it. You can get like a Find Familiar early in the game too, which is super useful. So yeah, Eldritch Knight, extremely useful subclass, and it's a little stronger than Battlemaster, I might say. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. I love reading people's thoughts on these classes. So next we have the Champion Fighter, which is still really good, but I just feel like Eldritch Knight and Barbarian or Battlemaster elevated past what the Champion Fighter can bring. So it does have 2 fighting styles, so you can get archery plus armor class, or great weapon fighting plus the armor class. So that is really good. But for crit fishing builds, I feel like relying on luck versus skill is not something you want to do. So I'm going to put them in the B tier. It's still a great class, but I just think Eldritch Knight and Battlemaster greatly outshine the Champion Fighter. I know there's some fans of the Champion Fighter, so I do have to give it an honorable mention there. But yeah, you get more mileage for these subclasses. Next we have the Barbarians, where there's one that's not good and 2 that are extremely good. So we'll start with Berserker Barbarian. This gives you the Frenzy instead of just going into a Rage, which allows you to do Frenzied Strike and Frenzied Throw. Throw Zerker builds are really strong. With Tavern Brawler and a Strength Potion, you can deal a ton of damage, and you basically don't miss. This is similar to the Eldritch Knight. These 2 are really great. I would have to say the Berserker Barbarian is probably like high A tier to S tier. You know, we'll go S tier because as a 5, you can take 5 levels of this, get yourself Rage. You can take 4 levels of the Battlemaster Fighter or Eldritch Knight, you get the Bind Weapon, and then you can take the Rogue Thief, get an extra bonus action, because in Rage Throw is a bonus action, so you can throw twice, attack twice, throw twice, or attack twice again. It's very versatile and a very strong subclass overall. The Barbarian adds the Constitution modifier to their armor class, so you can add the Constitution Amulet, gives you 23 armor class. So they are very tanky, and then they can also use shields with that. So very, very powerful. Wild Magic Barbarian, too unpredictable. I would put it probably bottom of D tier, just because you can accidentally drop a fireball on your team. You can actually spawn in a spectator. You can turn your team into cats and dogs. Nobody wants that on an Honour Mode playthrough, so I'm going to put it in the D tier. Wildheart Barbarian, though, is also probably like up there with S tier. I want to put the top of the 8, or yeah, probably around here in the A tier. This alongside Circle of Moon, Druid are 2 tankiest builds in the game. Bear Heart Barbarians get a heal, but they also get resistance to all damage types except for Psychic, which is really great because they can take damage and they can also dish it out. You can also take like the Tiger Heart Barbarian, which gives you a cleave attack, which bleeds enemies. Then you can take the aspect of the Wolverine, which will maim targets, giving them 0 movement speed. And if you knock them prone, then they can't move. So lots of versatility there. I just think that the Berserker Barbarian is a little bit stronger than the Wild Heart, so that's why I'm putting it up there. But now we're getting into another OP class with the Way of the Open Hand Monk. So you probably already know this build. 9 levels of Open Hand Monk with 3 levels of the Rogue Thief. It's extremely strong. You can deal over 100 points of damage with your bonus action. That is just absurd. So this is by far, it's next to the Sword Bearer for most OP subclass, because the Flurry of Blows topple, really great. You got great use for your bonus action. You can get 3 bonus actions that deal upwards of 100 damage each. This is the strongest single class damage class in the game. So if you want to deal damage to one target, Way of the Open Hand is probably your strongest bet. You can also even do some Radiating Orb shenanigans with this, because it stacks Radiating Orbs really quickly with the double fist attack, especially if you have the Manifestation of Soul, which gives you extra radiant damage. there's a lot of ways you can build out a open hand monk. They're really, really strong, and I highly encourage you to try it out if you haven't tried one before. I know there's a lot of haters on monk that just like, oh, I don't want to hit people with my fists. It's strong. 100 points of damage with a bonus action. If you have Asterion and you want to ascend him, he'll get an additional 1d10 of necrotic damage, which is doubled whenever you do attacks because you attack twice with your bonus action. So a potential extra 20 damage there is nuts. Way of the Shadow Monk is also pretty good. This is more stealth based and it's actually quite strong. I just think that the Way of the Open Hand Monk is a little bit stronger. So Way of Shadow, I do have to give it some respect. I've tried it multiple times and it's actually pretty strong. So I will put it in the A tier. I just think if you want to go with a monk, the Way of the Open Hand is just by and far the strongest. Maybe B tier, A tier to B tier, somewhere around here for the Shadow Monk. It's a really strong subclass that gives... It's stealthy and it deals damage. That's really something that's nice about it. And you can also pair with 3 levels of Rogue Thief too. But these two are much better than the Way of the Four Elements. I'm a fan of the Way of the Four Elements monk, but I just don't think on Honor Mode you want to risk it with this one. Because its spells use key points, and you don't get that many key points. You're basically out of key literally after like 3 or 4 spells. So I'd have to say this is probably C tier. I do love the class. It's better on like regular difficulties where you can do long rests a bit more frequently and get your points back. So yeah, the Way of the Shadow and the Way of the Open Hand being by far the best. Monks are really fun, but I would say try an open hand monk and you'll love it. Next we got the Paladins. Now Paladins are great subclasses. I don't think there's a wrong choice here, but there is a better choice with the Oath of Vengeance. I think Oath of Vengeance, 5 levels of Oath of Vengeance gives you Misty Step and Hold Person, which is awesome. And the Paladin itself is quite strong with Divine Smite. I'd have to say probably... I think that the Oath of Vengeance is the strongest. We'll put it there. The Oathbreaker is still pretty strong too. It gets like Hellish Rebuke, and you might end up doing an Oathbreaker Paladin yourself. Oath of the Ancients being a more healer-focused class, I might put it like top of the B tier. And then Oath of Devotion being probably around... It's still a Paladin, so I'll put it at the lower end of the B tier, but... The Vengeance they're all good. Like, they're all probably around A tier overall, but Vengeance Paladin just has a few extra benefits that... the other subclasses just don't have the same amount of. So, yeah, it's still a very good subclass, but yeah, other subclasses just get a little bit more oomph for their abilities. I like Paladins for their they give a plus whatever your charisma modifier is to your saving throws, which is really useful. So, they're great. I highly recommend having a Paladin or trying it out at least because it's pretty strong. Next, we got the Ranger. Now, the Rangers are tricky because they come online at level 11. So, with the Ranger, Hunter, and the Beastmaster, because the Beastmaster gets their summon becomes stronger at level 11, and the Hunter Ranger gets Volley at level 11. Volley's really good, don't get me wrong, but it's tough till you get to that point. I'd probably put a high B tier for the Hunter Ranger because it's great, but ranged weapon attacks, you may as well just do spells. I feel like spells just end up being higher damage overall, but once you get Volley, you can do a lot of cool things with it. My personal favorite is whenever you get Volley is to use the Drake Throat Glaive weapon to add ice damage, and then use the Snowburst Ring. So when you do a Volley, it deals ice damage, and it creates ice surfaces wherever you Volley. So then the enemy will slip and fall, lose their concentration. It's actually a really nice synergy there. The Ranger as a whole, though, they can get heavy armor. They're a half caster. The Beastmaster's not bad. I'll probably put it into the B tier as well. It's not a bad subclass, but it just gets a little bit outshined by some of the other subclasses here. So that's one thing that I have to keep in mind is that the Gloomstalker Ranger exists. And the Gloomstalker is a, I would say, high A tier. What makes the Gloomstalker so good is it's front-loaded. So this can be subclassed very well. With the Gloomstalker Ranger, you can add in the War Domain Cleric, because they're both wisdom based. You can add in the Fighter, you can add in the Rogue Thief, you can add in the Assassin, you can add in the Barbarian. The Gloomstalker is extremely good because you only need 3 levels to get its extra attack. So the Gloomstalker Ranger gives you an extra attack at the start of combat that deals an additional 1d8 of damage. That's huge for burst damage, especially if you take like the Rogue Assassin, which gives you extra abilities at level 1. Or level 3, it gives you the ability to attack with whenever you attack and start combo, your action and bonus action back, and you can also get critical hits on surprise targets. So the Assassin works well with the Gloomstalker, the Rogue Thief works well with it, the Fighter works well with it. There's a lot of good things with the Gloomstalker Ranger, so high A tier. Next, we got Rogue Thief, which I think is the best 3-level dip in the game. What this brings is an extra bonus action, and there's a lot of classes that benefit heavily from that, like the Barbarian benefits from it. The monk benefits from it. So the rogue thief is S tier, I would say. It's extremely great. However, going to level 12, it's probably D tier. The rogue just doesn't get the same benefits as the other subclasses. They mostly rely on their sneak attack, and they don't get an extra attack. So you're better off multiclassing with the Gloomstalker if you really want to do like a stealthy build, because the Gloomstalker is going to give you that extra attack at level 5. Arcane Trickster is garbage. It doesn't translate well from tabletop D&D to actual playing. The Mage Hand doesn't get the same benefits as the Mage Hand does in tabletop D&D, so I have to put it in the lowest of D tier. It's probably the worst subclass in the game, unfortunately. Maybe patch 7 will bring us some good news, but yeah. But finally, we got the Assassin, and the Assassin Rogue is pretty great. I would say it's probably sort of an A tier. Again, this is another 3-level dip, similar to the Rogue Thief, because that's where it gets all the benefit. This pairs really well with the Gloomstalker Ranger if you want to go with like a attack, disengage build, which is actually pretty good in Honour Mode. These two pair together very well. I just think the Rogue Thief is more... The Rogue Thief is sustained damage because you get bonus action every single turn, whereas the Assassin is basically first turn of combat. So, yeah, it's good, but I feel like the other subclasses are a little better. Now, we're getting into some really strong ones with the Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer. So, this is my favorite subclass in the game, alongside Storm Sorcery. Basically, what this does, it gives you mage armor at will. So you always have mage armor on your character, which gives you 13 armor class plus dexterity modifier. And then if you're wearing clothing, whatever armor class boosts from that, and whatever armor class boosts from your shield. I love the Draconic Bloodline because it also gives you an increase of 1 health point per sorcerer level, and it also gives you the ability to get your charisma modifier added to a damage type of your choice. So you can add it to cold damage, lightning damage, fire damage. Fire damage is nice because you can do Scorching Ray and do and they get +5, +6 to your charisma, or even +7 to your fire damage, which is huge, and it hits multiple times, so it's obviously really good. You can also get an addition to your cold damage, so if you do Cone of Cold, it's going to hit multiple targets for extra damage. The Draconic Bloodline is probably, I would say, College of Sword, Open Hand, and Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer, top 3 subclasses in the game, and then Cleric as well. Really, really effective, and I think if you want a spellcaster that's strong and doesn't require too much thinking, Draconic Bloodline is the one for you because it can quicken spells and cast 2 spells as a bonus. Cast a spell and another spell as a bonus action. It can twin haste to itself and someone else, so it gets... You have to be careful with twinning haste because if you lose haste, you lose your concentration. You're screwed because you lose your action next turn. But it's also really great because, yeah, you can cast 3 spells per turn with haste, so you can do Chain Lightning, Cone of Cold, Fireball. Like, you got a lot of versatility there. Extremely strong. The Wild Magic Sorcerer, it's not as good because, again, it's similar to the Wild Magic Barbarian where it's unpredictable, but I do think it's better than the Wild Magic Barbarian. I'm going to put it into C tier because it has the Tides of Chaos, which adds the ability to manipulate an ability check of your choosing, so it's still pretty good. I'm a fan of this. I'm currently having a Gale Origin run as a Wild Magic Sorcerer because I just love the Sorcerer so much, and he kind of makes sense to be a Wild Magic Sorcerer. But the Storm Sorcerer, this one is also probably S tier because you get Call Lightning, so it's a nice... It does require concentration, but if you run out of spell slots, you can Call Lightning, Call Lightning, Call Lightning. It does upwards of 30 damage, which becomes 60 if you have Create Water set up. It's quite strong, honestly, and you also get Fly as a bonus action. And this fly is unique because when you fly with the Storm Sorcerer action, you don't get hit by opportunity attacks. So that's great for survivability. The Draconic Bloodline does get the ability to fly late game, but the thing with the Storm Sorcerer is that their fly only does trigger opportunity attacks, whereas the Storm Sorcerer doesn't. So I'll put the Storm Sorcerer up here. It's really good, but I do think the Draconic is a little bit better. Depends how you build it. You can go with the Storm Sorcerer build with the Tempest Cleric and the 1 level of the Wizard to learn Chain Lightning, and then have use a Battle Mage Potion to get +3 to your spell save. And then you can just land those really, really effectively, and it does upwards of 168 damage, guaranteed if you hit, which is really great. Next is the Warlock. Now, I think the Warlock's a great subclass, but the Archfey is a little bit weaker, I would say. I'm going to put it into the C tier. The Warlock only gets up to level 5 spells. The Pact of the Blade is nice because you can attack twice and also cast spells, but you only get 2 spell slots till level 11, which is kind of limiting, although they do pair well with a rogue or a bard for the extra short rest because you get your spell slots back at short rest. The Fiend is probably the best of them. I like Warlocks. I ran my first playthrough, but it gets nerfed the hardest by Honour Mode because you lose the extra benefit of getting that extra attack. So if you have a Paladin with level 5 extra attack, you can take in normal modes the Pact of the Blade and gets 10 attack or get an extra attack at level 10. So 3 attacks at level 10, which is quicker than the fighter at level 11. The Fiend is great. It gives extra damage, or gives temporary health whenever you take out an enemy. It also gives fire spells. I'll probably put it somewhere around middle of the B tier. The Great Old One's probably a little bit better in Honour Mode because you can take a 1-level dip and get basically what it does when you get a critical hit, it can cause fear on targets nearby, and they have to succeed a wisdom saving throw. It is in a very large area. Some people say this is incredible for that, but the area is not that big, so that's one thing to keep in mind. But still great if you want to go for critical hits. So yeah, I would say the Warlock did get hit the hardest by Honour Mode of all the subclasses. But next we got ourselves the Wizard. Now, the Wizard is really strong because the Abjuration Wizard exists. So Abjuration Wizards can basically get their Arcane Ward up to a point where they don't take damage. And then also they can put Armor of Agathis on themselves so that attackers take 30 cold damage, which can be doubled to 60. And they don't get hit. So you can run around triggering opportunity attacks and make the enemy take damage. It's actually really good. I'd put it up in the S tier. This is one of the most broken builds if you get it set up correctly. I'm not sure. Yeah, somewhere around here. The only thing is I don't enjoy playing the Abjuration Wizard too much compared to some of the other subclasses in this game. So I don't want to rank it too high, but it is a really fun one overall. So, or it is a really strong one overall. I don't find it fun too much, but it is powerful because you don't take damage until your Arcane Ward wears off, which is really easy to maintain. Conjuration is okay. I feel like Wizard compared to Sorcerer, the Sorcerer will outdamage it 9 times out of 10 with Twin Haste and the ability to quicken spells. But the Necromancer is a pretty good choice too. I'll put the Necromancer in the A tier because you can use what's a really cool interaction with the Necromancer Wizard is if you get the Staff of Cherished Necromancy. It's in Act 3. Whenever you cast a Necromancy spell, so this counts as Circle of Death, you get 3 times the spell's level back as health. So you can get 18 health back, and the nice thing about the Staff of Cherished Necromancy is when you cast a spell and take out a target with it, you get Life Essence, which gives you a free Necromancy spell. So you can do Circle of Death, Circle of Death, Circle of Death, get 18 health back every single time. And the icing on the cake is summons, whenever you bring in zombies, they're immune to necrotic damage. So they aren't taking damage from your Circle of Death, and you can hit huge area of effect damage. As I mentioned earlier, this pairs very well with the Circle of Spores Druid, so they go together like PB&J. They're a very great subclass, 6 of each, and you can scribe scrolls and take level 12 spells like level 6 spells like Circle of Death and use that with your intelligence modifier. So very strong. I highly recommend these two classes together. Conjuration's nice, but it just is outshined by a lot of these other ones. Like I'll put it probably C tier. Like it's good, but it's not the worst class in the game. But I just think if you're going with a certain subclass, you're going Abjuration, you're going Necromancy, Divination as well with their Portent dice, which is really nice because Portent dice allows you to change an attack roll twice per long rest, and you can also at level 6 get the ability to get a prophecy, which allows you to change it as well. By doing the prophecy, so like taking on an enemy with fire damage, get your Portent dice back. It's really great, especially with like a halfling. You can control the battlefield really well with halfling's luck and also the divination wizard, so it's pretty good. Enchantment kind of same like as the other ones, it just doesn't have as much benefit. Evocation wizard also pretty good. I'd probably say another A tier class because it's quite strong. It adds the intelligence modifier attacks, and this is actually really good if you use a magic missile build, the AK-47 build. It's kind of strong. I think Abjuration's the strongest of the wizards, but it's still pretty good. Illusion doesn't translate well from tabletop D&D, so I'll put that one in the C tier as well. And finally, Transmutation Wizard is nice, but it got broken. It used to be able to create a Constitution saving throw stone that you could give to someone. No longer the case, because if you take the wizard out of your party, it doesn't have the effect. So it's still a good one. You can create different types of transmutation stones, but I just think that Abjuration S tier, Divination A tier, Evocation A tier, Necromancy A tier, the Wizard has some better subclass choices. So there it is. The best subclasses in Baldur's Gate 3 for Honour Mode: Sword Bard, Open Hand Monk, Draconic Sorcerer, Late Domain Cleric, Tempest Domain, Eldritch Knight, Berserker, Thief, Abjuration Wizard, Storm Sorcerer, Battlemaster Fighter, War Domain Cleric, 1 level dip, and the Oath of Vengeance Paladin. So all classes can beat Honor Mode, but I think the best of them are the ones up in the S tier and A tier. So also the B tier is pretty solid too, with like Hunter Ranger, Circle Land Druid, Beastmaster Ranger, but they come online a little bit too late for them to be super useful in Honor Mode. So there it is. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I have a lot of fun making these tier lists, so if you have any videos that you want to see, let me know in the comments. But there it is. Best subclasses in Baldur's Gate 3 for Honor Mode. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button below, and I'll see you all in the next video.